I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, April 16th meeting of the Transportation Advisory Committee. Can we please get a roll call?
Yes. Mr. Freeze?
Present.
Ms. Donovan? Mr. McEnroth?
Here.
Mr. Simmons?
Here.
Jessica should be arriving soon. Mr. Morgan?
Here.
All right. Looks like the first thing is going to be the approval of minutes from last month, March 19th. Since I wasn't here, I'm going to defer to you all. Do we have any changes, additions, subtractions, corrections that need to be made from last month?
I didn't see any.
All right. All those in favor of adoption of the minutes?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll approve those. I'm going to guess by the absence of bodies that there's no public comment. Am I correct there? Okay. Oh,
Either that or can't get in the door.
if you lock them out, they can't talk. All right, we're right on to new business then. And it looks like our first topic is going to be the 20 is plenty next steps. Is that you, John?
That is, I just catching up with you here a little bit. Yeah, so we don't have, well, we've got the slide up on the PowerPoint, but or up on the screen, but it's not part of our PowerPoint presentation. So this is our opportunity to talk a little bit more about this 20 is plenty. Ben, you weren't here last meeting, but there was a motion regarding 20 is plenty.
I caught up on the online version. I watched it, so.
And Bruce, I don't think you were here either. So 20 is plenty is really a program about reducing residential speed limits from 25 to 20 miles per hour. And we talked about the motion, trying to remember the motion, the exact wording in the motion, probably in our minutes somewhere, but it was to approach the city commission about the idea of pursuing 20 is plenty, I think.
And also pursuing the community engagement portion of that.
Yeah. So that motion well, I think it caught our attention a little bit here, definitely in talking through it a little bit more up at the engineering group with Dana a little bit. We were reminded about the energy that went into the speed limitation that was presented to the city commission back in 2018 and 19. I think it was discussed in 2018, and I think we brought it to the commission in 2019. Is that kind of your recollection as well? And so we went and pulled that packet. We kind of went through some of the information that was presented to the city commission back then, and just kind of got to thinking a little bit more about this idea and maybe what we need to get from the Transportation Advisory Committee in terms of some ideas or direction or thoughts. So we just kind of want to open it up for a little bit more discussion. And I think I'm going to take this a little bit out of order. We do need to determine, if we're going to engage, how are we going to engage, talk a little bit about the city commission work session and the city commission meeting. But, and in doing that, just kind of recognizing how that went over last time. And last time we presented, neighborhood speed limits. We associated them with what we call family-friendly streets in our transportation system plan. And the commission had a lot of what I have since been reminded about, a lot of good discussion around the idea of 20 is plenty. And so I just kind of I'm trying to find my note page on that right now, and I'm not getting right to it. So just a second here. Let me find that. So there was a PowerPoint that we've included from 2019 in your packet. So I'm sure many of you haven't had a chance to look at that, but that's kind of your homework, is to kind of go back and look at that a little bit. But some of the comments that we got from the commission, city commission at the time, were well, we definitely need input from the Oregon City Police Department about, the idea of, will they enforce 20-mile-per-hour speed limits? So that'll be important. How do we educate the public about this idea, or how do we get public feedback that suggests that they really want 20 is plenty, and if so, where and how far spread? So trying, there are some of their suggestions where we should, if we're going to go down this path, or before we go down this path, we need to encourage more community knowledge about the 20 is Plenty program. We had some questions about whether or not, the reduction of speed limits or signage of these 25-mile-an-hour residential zones is really going to improve safety. And again, more suggestion that we need better community outreach on that with those facts as to whether or not it really improves safety. And we had some information that was presented in the slide that showed obviously an accident at 25 miles an hour versus an accident at 20 is much more impactful to those involved. So you could argue pretty quickly that, well, I think there is a safety element to this, but is it justified? So they were definitely asking tougher questions and wanting more evaluation, questioning the cost and the value that brought to the program. How do we make sure drivers are aware, given that there's a basic rule requirement? They really kind of wanted it to be driven up, the idea or the suggestion driven up from the neighborhood. So if you remember, the Kanema neighborhood is the one neighborhood that we have implemented 20 is Plenty. And so that we actually solicited for application, and the Kanema neighborhood stepped up and did that. There were some suggestions on how we evaluate the success of the program. And again, just the neighborhood, if the neighborhood feels it's unsafe, then there'd be more supportive of it. And we would need to let the city commission know what kind of criteria we were using to make those decisions. So that was some of the commission feedback that we got, and just thinking through that. And I also feel like when we take this to the commission, staff took it last time. And while staff is always going to be there to support, I think this idea of pursuing 20 is Plenty is a legitimate concern. I think Portland is a good example of where it's been implemented, and that stemmed from a neighborhood outcry. But when we do this, it's going to take some community engagement. It's going to definitely take some salesmanship with the city commission. The city commission's changed since 2019, so different people are on the commission now that may have a completely different feeling about the idea. But we before we test those waters, I think it makes sense for us to discuss some ideas and some thoughts from each of you about interest in engaging with the city commission or with the community on this idea, and then kind of putting together to me, the more I think about it and the more energy I put into it, it's kind of a work plan. And right now we don't have this even on our goals. So our goals, I think we're scheduled to meet to talk about goals real soon. I'd like to, get that and articulate this a little bit better than maybe what came out of the motion, to just say, here's what we can accomplish in a certain amount of timeline. Maybe it's trying to do some community outreach, trying to do some community survey. What does that look like? Does that mean presentations and neighborhood meetings? And figuring out how to get at least an initial read on whether or not the community would support this, and if they would everywhere, or if they want it in a particular neighborhood. I heard pretty loud and clear that they thought that the thinking was that the McLaughlin neighborhood would be pretty interested in that. Obviously, we get neighborhood complaints about speeding all the time. Usually, though, I would acknowledge that those are on those corridors that wouldn't necessarily qualify for 20 is Plenty, right? They're on, we heard on 5th or Lynn Avenue, some of those, Malala, definitely those corridors that are more speed set through a state speed study. Not so much normally inside you know, the neighborhoods, but I'm sure there's exceptions to that. So really, the other little bit of information that was put together was just some information that we got from our street department when the question was raised, boy, what if we had to go out and change, you know, citywide all of our 25-mile-an-hour speed limit signs? And then we did hear from the police department that said, well, you know, we would struggle to enforce that given our current workload, but, you know, it would be more complaint based. And if it was received in a complaint, we would want the signage to be placed on, you know, if it's a neighborhood that's got through traffic, then both ends of that. If it's, you know, one way in, one way out kind of thing, then we'd want to make sure it was signed in locations that drivers could read it in either direction. So there was some information like that was provided, but very high level, right? We really haven't sat down and had a serious conversation with them about it, which I think would be another piece of kind of homework for us. So there's some cost information here. I think I was trying to do the math, Audrey, to figure these out because Audrey put this together for us. So the existing signs, I think Jason suggested the sign cost was around $60 for each sign. So that's where the 10,050 came from because we have 175 signs. And then staff time is probably around 30 to 40 minutes per sign. Well, there wasn't, 15 minutes was the amount of time just because we don't have to put a post in the ground. We're pretty much just taking down the old one and putting up the new one. And then any kind of new signs, there was a post cost and the anchor piece cost and some of the hardware pieces that go to that, plus the sign cost. So they're more expensive. So if we needed to add locations, so we didn't try to come up with a citywide cost. It's just cost for you to keep in mind when you're thinking about, oh, it's not insignificant to put up a new sign. So again, just some information there. I know the city commission meeting calendar is pretty full. So what, do we know? Do you remember the date when we're meeting to discuss goals?
It'd be June 5th.
June 5th. So we could probably have another conversation about this in June. But yeah, it's, for me, it's 20 is plenty is an attractive program for a lot of people. You know, there's some that we've seen through some of our speed studies that we've done, feedback both ways about whether or not folks really appreciate lower speed limits or not. But if we're truly thinking about our neighborhoods and our livability, I think it's more likely going to be favored than unlikely, right? But it still, I think, would make good sense to make sure the community at large knows that we're thinking about this and proposing it, and maybe even getting some additional supporters that might, you know, speak on behalf of the topic if we're sitting in front of our city commission with an idea that's generated not only from the Transportation Advisory Committee, but for the greater community. So that's what I had kind of in mind to say. Did I forget anything, you think? Pretty good. So maybe we can talk about it. It's unfortunate Raymond's not here because he made the motion and is pretty passionate about it. I'm certain that he'll review the video. Mm-hmm. So maybe we can have some more discussion here today, recognizing that, you know, well, actually, can't remember who seconded it. Was it Cheddarmere? Huh? Julie, and she's not here either, right? So they're both gone today. So it's just queuing this up. I think trying to recognize that we took a run at this once and we kind of had to run away with our tail between our legs, and we don't want to do that again. And I think it's a commendable program, especially if we're talking about livability. So
when I watched the video back from last meeting, and Raymond was very well engaged with it, two things I kind of pulled out of that was that, you know, engaging with the community, get their opinion on maybe establishing what problem we're solving, because I think that could be different neighborhood to neighborhood or the need-based from neighborhood to neighborhood. So I think it's very important that we do reach out because what our perception might be is maybe not reality. There may be more of a need than we think, or there might be less of a need. And I think reaching out to those community associations is a great start. The second thing, I think he said the McLaughlin neighborhood, I think, has already been vocal about it, so I think we've got one community that would probably be willing to be a secondary program to Kenema if they wanted to be step 2 of the project. But I do remember going back at the last time we talked through this, Dana and Vance are both not here, and I do remember asking, do we have some data from Tigard, which Vance has some history, in Portland, which Dana was trying to research, on what the effectiveness of the program has been in those cities that have adopted it. I don't recall that we ever got an answer. I know Dana was pretty well stymied by Portland. They just kind of didn't talk to her. And I don't know if Vance ever had a chance to get anything out of Tigard. But for me, maybe a 3-part. One is establishing what problem we're solving. And number 2 is, by implementing 20 is plenty, are we actually solving those problems? And I think the third piece you already touched on is the enforcement part. And I think changing a speed zone, changing a law, changing a rule, they're all great in virtue. But if we can't actually enforce them and change the behavior that we're trying to solve said problem, then I think we're just spending money that's not getting us anywhere. So it's very, very virtuous on the idea, but I don't know how well we can implement change. I think Tim mentioned in the other meeting, our neighborhood doesn't have speed zone signs. I drove through there on the way here thinking about it, and I looked, and the fastest I was going downhill was about 16 miles an hour. So other cars in the area, obviously coming uphill, probably going slower. If I had gone a different direction, there's speed bumps. So I think in a neighborhood like ours, other than the random person that's going through there like a bat out of you-know-what, I don't think that's going to change behavior. So I think maybe an enforcement issue, if we could get, those targeted people that are causing the complaints, might be a better approach. Just my 2 cents.
It is important to remember that when we did this in Kenema, that Kenema is structurally different than the rest of the city. And so I don't think anything that comes out of Kenema we can use as indication of effectiveness anywhere else. And the other point is, my observation is, you could probably do better if you hired more traffic cops.
And I think that goes back to identifying our problem. And I think reaching out to the community and finding out, is there a problem and how big of a problem? And I mean, I think if Dana could pull up the numbers of the number of accidents that have happened in the city and these residential neighborhoods between, 20 miles an hour and 30 miles an hour, I've got to venture to guess we're going to find very few incidents. I've seen the charts with the number of fatalities and the number of serious injury crashes in the city of Oregon City, and it's very small. So again, I'm going back to what problem are we solving? So I'd like to find out from the neighborhoods, because I could be wrong, and that's why we need community outreach. And participating in the neighborhood association meetings is, I think, a great start. And if I'm wrong, I'll eat crow and go ahead and and change with that.
The other thing I think we ought to know is what Oregon statute says about the fine, the traffic fine being enabled for the various speeds over the posted. Because my recollection when I looked it up is, for anything under 10 miles an hour, it's almost pocket change.
Just for the fine?
Just for the fine.
Yeah.
And so if that is still the case, and if I'm right, then if we were to institute a blanket 20 is mile an hour residential, we might be able to, in fact, get the speeds down to 30.
And I think it's very dependent on neighborhood. I mean, like I mentioned before, where I'm at, speed bumps, terrain, turns, stop signs. I mean, to try to break 25 miles an hour in my neighborhood is darn near, you have to try. Now, I know that's not the case all across the city, but I think, maybe this is more of a community-driven, neighborhood-driven approach, just like with Kenema, they had a very specific set of circumstances that was, I won't say requiring, but needing this program. But I don't know that putting a blanket policy into effect, adding the extra costs, adding the extra signs, adding the extra work to your crew that I already know is overworked, if that really nets us anything in the end.
We had unanimous vote on the motion. So our intention is to continue to move forward with kind of details of that. I'd forgotten about the Tiger piece and the connection there. I do think Dana reached out to Portland and kind of didn't get a lot of feedback. Such a big organization. I did think that maybe we could look at the Kenema data, but you're right, it's unique. That's a unique neighborhood across all of our neighborhoods, so I'm not sure that we'll see much, but we already have some, so we've done some new traffic counting, so we may have some information there that we could share. Again, trying to think about how to reach out with kind of just an initial feel. It would be helpful to have Raymond in the room to kind of better understand. I know he's pretty active in his neighborhood.
Is he part of the McLaughlin neighborhood?
I don't know. The last meeting I went to, he wasn't there, but I don't know that all their board members or all their members were there. I think he's pretty active. He's pretty active going to them. I just don't know if he's one of their board members or not, but
would it behoove us to maybe reach out to each of the neighborhood associations? I know I've been participating in that and asking of the fellow participants to be active in those. Would that be a great place to start, to say, hey, we're having this conversation about 20 is plenty. We want to bring it to the neighborhoods first. We want to see how you guys feel about it, where you think it might be helpful and what problems it could solve for your neighborhood, and maybe start with a piece by piece, neighborhood by neighborhood, because focusing in on those problem areas. If it's another Kenema out there, then, putting the time and energy makes sense.
yeah. Well, the other challenge with the neighborhoods is their meetings are like quarterly. So trying to get on the calendar for that would be good now. We could probably help with that. We've done some, if you remember our speed studies, we've been doing electronic surveys where people actually can pinpoint their address if they want. They don't have to, but they can pinpoint their address. And we could kind of get a sense for that through that mode, which, is, I think, an option.
I'm all for reaching out to the community and finding out, what their view is and what they see as the problem,
Do you think the planning commission, when they're looking at development of new neighborhoods, that if they instead of designing neighborhoods with straight streets, to have more of a curve with cul-de-sacs, usually those neighborhoods seem to have lower speed limits because there's not the tendency to, I can see to the end. Let's see how fast I can get there. Because like with his neighborhood, it's got a lot of curves in it. It's like a sweeping curve. Everything's a sweeping curve there. Mm-hmm. But you don't have the speed issues, whereas you have the next one up, where you have a straight line and 30 houses on each side and then cross streets. So I'm wondering if they start looking at that in development of new phases of neighborhoods, make more of curb appeal of curving of the neighborhoods, that can control a lot of, and you don't need signage, for one.
That's probably up to the developer and not to the city, is it?
Well, we definitely make comment on that and can help work with them. I would say most of what's left in Oregon City is got, especially in, your neighborhood, for instance, or South End, or to some degree even out in the Beaver Creek concept area. Beaver Creek concept area is going to lend itself to longer, but more likely to be a boulevard that's a speed limit will be set. But in Park Place, there's so much topography up there. You almost have to build it more like your neighborhood is interesting because it was on the hilltop and there was an airstrip there. It was an airstrip, right? So it just kind of lent itself to that. But so typically, no, we don't necessarily direct them to build curves to reduce speeds. That's well, to be honest with you, it's more on what land is owned and how much developable lots they can get on it is really what kind of lays that out. And then if we can get cul-de-sacs, we're not in love with cul-de-sacs either, because they definitely make, kind of for walkable communities, they're kind of at the end of the world unless you build a pathway to get through to the next side. But we do still see cul-de-sacs come in. So
Would it, to narrow our focus, reaching out to Raymond and the McLaughlin neighborhood and kind of targeting them as the next step in this, to kind of get a sense from that neighborhood, maybe target them with some campaigns as far as Facebook and other avenues that we can get a survey put out to them, attend the next meeting, Raymond, myself, whomever, you guys.
Yeah, and with the staff person, pair that up.
Yeah, and see if that tees up the kind of the thing that we can replicate if needed across the city. Or if we go into that meeting and come out of it with not a lot of need, maybe that's our litmus test of what the next step would look like.
Actually, one of the things that comes to mind is also we have in several areas where there's a potential speeding problem, we also have some dangerous intersections. And I'm thinking of Division up by the hospital. I think it's 11th that comes on, it's a dead end that comes on to Division right in that corner that you can't see around. And the people are going around the corner, but there's like 50 feet and there's an intersection, blind when you're coming from the hospital. So there's a few cases like that where I think that if we can get the speed down to where you're within stopping distance of somebody pulling out onto the roadway, I think we can get, if we can find those locations and deal with them, I think that will help and spread some of the feeling that maybe not everybody needs to be at top velocity all the time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though, if we're talking out Division there in front of the hospital and those office buildings, probably wouldn't qualify as the neighborhood that would go to a 20.
Division's an interesting street. It feels very neighborhood-like, but I don't remember what the posted speed is on it and what it's classified
They're
as.
25.
Are they 25? Yeah, classified. Yeah.
Because you got doctor's offices and different.
It might qualify. There is qualification requirements. That was the other thing, is the roadway must be located in a residential zone. I don't know if the zoning is quite right. Vehicle speeds less than 30 miles per hour measured at the 85% speed. Pretty sure they would meet that one. Average volume fewer than 2,000 vehicles per day. I'm not sure about where the volume would play out. So yeah, we'd have to look at that a little bit. But I think the point though is that reaching out to maybe starting smaller as opposed to wider, because I think I remember hearing citywide at one point, and I was, that's another piece where we're probably, but I, given the kind of the gridded network of McLaughlin, given the cut through, we'd probably have to be a lot more clear about what streets qualify and which ones don't, so that, because a lot of them may be thinking about Washington Street, which probably wouldn't qualify, versus, Madison or something, so. But if there's anything that I've said that you disagree with or want more information on, I guess I'm trying to, the other big piece is just kind of the commitment by the TAC. If and when we get there, I don't want to be sitting alone in front of the commission or Dana sitting alone. I want to make sure we've got support from the TAC to help present on that and to, advocate for that, so that it doesn't come off as a staff initiated process.
Oh, just on a slightly different note, but just because it came to mind, I was in Portland yesterday, down on Bell Avenue and Johnson Creek Boulevard, and they have an interesting sign in that area. And we're in a situation, it's like was describing on Division, they have a sign out there now. It says, high accident danger intersection that they have installed, or they have collected a lot of accidents. So perhaps bringing some of these near collision places might help reinforce this idea of cutting down some of the speed.
Yeah.
Are we needing a motion? to
No,
move forward with anything?
I just really kind of wanted to inform it. I was realizing with Raymond not in the room,
Yeah.
or Julie, that,
They all three of them.
they all three seem to have comment on that, so we missed all three of them, but you're here. So again, if you have anything,
I have one comment.
Petronell?
I know this was in 2019, this project
Yeah.
that we got here. I know we got increase of citizens. Do we know how much more people we have in Oregon City since this was done?
yes, we do based on population data. What population data lags a little bit, but we could look from 2019 to 2022. And we might have 2023 data.
I was thinking there's more cars on the road, for sure.
Yeah, we could also look at, our traffic count information and maybe spot check a few places to show, well, here's what we collected in, we do those every 3 years. Well, we've switched, so this year we're doing a third every year, but we have a tradition of every 3 years we were doing, so we could just kind of look at kind of the traffic growth in a couple of good represented areas and kind of give you some trip generation numbers, and then we
I would
could
think
give
it would
you
make
population
more
numbers too.
sense. I mean, we're looking at, McLaughlin, let's see how much that, that is impacted
Yeah.
versus maybe other places. And I agree with what problem are we solving? Is it going to be enforced, or are we just wasting our time? And then, of course, public comment, and that would probably go to the associations. I agree with all of those.
Maybe we can reach out to Raymond in between, find out when that next neighborhood association meeting is. I'd be willing to attend, schedule permitting.
Great.
And to answer your question, at the end of the day, if we do find something viable here, I would happily sit next to you at the commission meeting and not leave you on your own, so.
Great.
It's on a Thursday, monthly on a Thursday. I'm trying to remember if it's the second or third Thursday.
We'll figure that out, and we'll
month.
connect with Raymond, make sure he gets, I'm pretty certain he'll watch the meeting. He's good about that, so.
If you're watching the meeting, Raymond, email in.
Let's see, so by the way, our agenda tonight was pretty much derived from your comments last week. So I think that's important for you to know. If you were here, there was a lot of feedback, and so we've tried to plug some of that in. Cheddarmere, for instance, asked about the City of Milwaukee SAFE program. So do you want to pull up that presentation? And this was in response to some information I brought about transportation funding and just kind of how we fund transportation projects. It was kind of a transportation funding 101, and just kind of acknowledging that we really don't have all the money we'd like to be able to build all the, whether it be sidewalks or rapid flashing beacons or capacity projects, there's limitations there. So that's what that was about. And Cheddarmere brought up the City of Milwaukee and their SAFE program. And SAFE is for safe access for everyone. And so I've got some more notes on that. So there's really, in Milwaukee, in the City of Milwaukee, they have some things that we don't have, and we have some things that they don't have. So they have funded a pretty extensive list of projects, or at least have potential to fund. through three sources. And that's where I thought it was important. The safe fee is different than our pavement maintenance utility fee, but it's a monthly fee that goes on their bill. And it's, I saw it somewhere in here, $574 a month. And so over an 11-year period, they're proposing to collect almost $22 million through that safe fee. Now, what we know about that is that it's dedicated to debt reimbursement. So they have gone out and issued bond debt to get a big chunk of money. I don't know what that chunk of money is, but they've borrowed to help fund some of their infrastructure projects, transportation infrastructure projects. They don't have a vote for indebtedness. Oregon City has a vote for indebtedness. To me, anytime we talk about voting on something, that again is going to be, that decision is going to be made at the city commission level, and we better have support or it's going to fail, right? Because any fundraising or tax increasing, utility rate increasing measure usually is pretty easy to defeat if you don't have, the right people at the table to champion that idea. And usually that's the city commission. It's also volunteer community members like the TAC. But if you've got folks that are undermining that, it will definitely fail. In Milwaukie, they don't have that voter approval requirement for indebtedness. Our charter requires us to take that to a vote. So yes, they have the safe fee. And as far as I know, they don't have a pavement maintenance fee. So our pavement maintenance fee is much higher than $574 per month, but it's dedicated to pavement maintenance. This is not dedicated to pavement maintenance. It may cover some of pavement maintenance, but it's really dedicated to implementation of the SAFE program, which I have a slide to show you a little bit more. The other element of that they call grants and private development contributions. And my question here was, and that was about 41% or just under 21 million over that 11-year period. Grants are questionable. How you get them, there's competition is pretty high for those. We pursue them as well. But, if there's grants available and Milwaukee's likely going to land a lot of that funding, and maybe they've kind of estimated that number pretty low. Don't really know. But the private development piece intrigued me a little bit in that we can see private development building out a lot of infrastructure. Sears property is a good example of that. They're going to build another piece of sidewalk along Holcomb. We see it in other areas along Holmes Lane, that multifamily development, they're going to build it there. Maple Lane, all those developments are really required to do frontage improvements. And sometimes we can require them to build offsite improvements for things. But I'm curious if their private development contributions are over and above that, private development requirement. I wasn't able to answer that today. We weren't exactly sure where that came from. But it's an interesting piece. We've struggled to get the improvements out of the private development that we have coming through town. So it's questionable as to whether or not they would be in that same situation, unless they're getting some kind of credit for like building a safe route to a TriMet transit center or something like that.
So in the last meeting, you and Chetamir were talking about the SDC charges and in lieu of fees and how they're going into a bucket, but maybe they're waiting for a larger project before they're used. And by the time they get applied, you might be 2 or 3 years down the road. Now the cost has gone up considerably. Using this debt tool as a way to pre-fund the project and then repay the debt, is that theory maybe something we should look at as far as doing these projects at today's cost with some sort of not grant program, but a bond of sorts, and then using those SDC charges as they come in to backfill and pay it back?
There's great value in pursuing, indebtedness. Obviously, you got to pay finance charges just like anything else, but usually the sooner you can get the project done, cost of these projects seems to only be going up. So there's that element. There's the other element, which is new development will help pay for that, because, you know, you're going to start your payments as soon as you borrow the money, or close to it, depending on the program. But you're going to pay that off over the next 15, 20 years, right? Which means that new folks that haven't been in the city will likely have to pay a portion of that through a fee, as opposed to, you know, the existing residents having to pay for it. So there is huge advantages if you can, I think, again, produce a list that their SAFE program went through a pretty large, extensive amount of public involvement to get to the list of projects that they wanted to build. And so there was a lot of community input, that buy off on the projects. Again, I think they, at their policy level decision, the city commission at the time, their mayor he was walking bike heavy in Milwaukie. By heavy, I mean he was into walking and biking to his destinations. So he was a strong advocate for that. So I'm guessing he led the charge, and that's how they got that. There's one other element to this, which is urban renewal, and most cities that have urban renewal projects have been pairing that with some of these other projects to kind of help fill gaps and maybe not cover a huge portion of the pie, but a section of the pie or a piece of the pie. In Oregon City right now, urban renewal is on hold, and urban renewal's, powerful tool that many cities in Oregon use, at least the ones that are doing great things in their cities. So in our city, it's held up in court, and while we still have an urban renewal program, how we spend that money is pretty limited. So that's, so you want to go to the next slide? So this is the Milwaukie kind of area. If you're familiar with Milwaukie, I didn't intend to go through these in great detail, but they had what they called a PSAC, or a Public Safety Advisory Committee, which included representatives from the neighborhood district associations, was formed and developed a priority plan over the course of 11 public meetings and within a year timeline. So all the members contributed to the priority corridor map by identifying locations with ADA, with non-ADA that needed ADA improvements. They identified additional priority corridors, including safe routes to schools, and comparing the corridors with adopted master plans as well as past planning efforts. So, next slide. These are just some statistics. And some of the things that they've completed so far between 2019 and 2023. They completed quite a list. It looks like 8 different projects. They're measuring their success by the lineal feet of sidewalk and paths that they've added, the number of students attending schools within a half a mile of completed safe projects, the number of trees preserved, the number of trees planted, and the number of public engagement opportunities. So that's how they're evaluating that SAFE program. Again, what I'm understanding is if they have a pavement maintenance utility fee, it's nowhere near our pavement in terms of dollar amount, our pavement maintenance utility fee. So in Oregon City, it feels very much to me like we've supported pavement maintenance, more than we have, adding more sidewalks or transportation facilities. So I think, is that the last slide on that one? Any questions? Again, Cheddar was the one who raised this. I just wanted to make sure you guys knew that we weren't, I don't feel like we're missing out on anything other than, yes, it would be nice if we had some flexibility with the indebtedness, but that's pretty limited. Not to say that, the policymakers wouldn't approve moving forward with something like this. But it's been my experience that there's been a fair amount of need for other priorities, parks being one of them. So I'm not sure if the commission would agree that that's the greatest need. And then the next topic was Senate Bill 1537. Petronella, I think you asked a little bit about this. In the packet is a staff report about that. We asked our planning director, Aquila Hurd-Ravitch, to respond because I didn't know too much about that Senate bill. And so I think just if I could, she's got lots of good information in there, but I think the main point is that Oregon City's not likely to pursue that in that we've already got 3 concept areas that are slow to develop out, so asking for more land. In fact, one of those out in the Park Place concept plan area, which included Holly Lane out in the county, out by the Tumwater School, is, I think we gave away, or we gave that back to the metro region so that others, so she didn't see it as something that would be pursued by the city anytime soon. Just so you know that. And I think the last thing I have is just an update on the Safe Routes to School project on Holcomb. I don't remember who asked about this one, but was it Chedamere? Okay, so he better watch the show too, huh? That project's, the design work is done. It's out for bids right now. So just for people that are not familiar with it, there's the green piece is the piece that fronts the Sears property. That's going to be built by the developer, as well as one rapid flashing beacon. It's right there at the, I would say we don't have a directional arrow here, but on the kind of the left side of the green space. No, it's, and oh yes, I should clarify. So, okay, the,
Actually, you
won't
can't
go
have
that
the
far.
mouse, sorry.
So that green area most that you're pointed at right now.
Where it says Sears Phase 1 residential development condition. So that section,
Yeah.
actually, they started on it today. That's.
Yeah, they're working through that. So this area right here, so that's built, that's developer built, as is this crossing here. These others, who knows when? There's no development proposal that's proposing to do anything there right now or here right now. But these are the pieces, these pieces highlighted in yellow, and this little piece right here, this pedestrian crossing, those are all part of the Holcomb Boulevard Safe Routes to School project that the city's finished with design. It's out to bid. Bids are scheduled to open on Thursday. We're really hoping for good bids on that. The bidding environment has changed a little bit. We're keeping our fingers crossed that it stays that way, but for our annual paving contract, I think I heard we had 14 bidders, and I might be off a little bit on the number of bidders, but we had a lot of bidders, more than we've ever had, and the bid price was about $300,000 less than what our engineer's estimate was. So we're hoping the same happens here. We get lots of good bidders and they bid low. Our intention is if we have good bids with nothing, and no anomalies that would kind of slow us down at all, we'd take that to the city commission in May, and we'd expect construction to happen in June through November of 2024. So that's where we're at with that one.
They poured the curbs today
Yeah.
in front of Sears, because it was, this morning it was gravel. When I came home tonight, it was cement.
Good.
So I hope they do the rest of the road, because it's a mess.
Yeah,
They
I
get
think
that
they're
thing
gonna, it'll be, at the end of the day, we should have at least that downhill travel
And
lane
they
better.
cut all the trees down below that, so I guess that's for the sidewalk improvement.
It is for the sidewalk improvement as well as the power and communications.
Is that going underground?
No, it's not all going underground, but the poles needed to go back, and the because of the hanging wires, they still need to, they still needed the aerial clearance from those trees, so yeah. Okay, I think that's all I had for tonight.
All right.
But I'm happy to answer any questions or,
Questions for Dawn?
Thank you. That was a lot.
if not, we can,
All right, on to future communications. Does anybody have anything we want to add to the list for our next meeting? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
we'll have goals to talk about.
Yeah, so are
And
we
so
gonna,
if,
that is next meeting, correct? We decided that. So goal setting for next meeting. So everybody needs to start thinking about what our goals will look like, and we can find our existing ones on the Oregon City website. So if you want to refresh your memory of what we decided last year, where those fit in, maybe before next meeting, read through that, and that'll spur on some good discussion of what we accomplished and what we can take off the list and what we need to add to the list.
I always like goals that we can accomplish or achieve. So that's important. That's kind of where think we were all feeling with the 20 is plenty, that's a big program if done right. And,
Speaking of accomplished, did the new design manual features get moved into the
they're on the web.
neighborhood, that publication that we made up a few years ago?
Yeah, we also plugged that into our design standards, so it's an exhibit or an addendum, not an addendum. Yeah, I think it's an exhibit to our transportation design standards that were adopted. So it's out there. I want to say didn't you update that,
I think so.
Audrey, not too long ago? Just to make sure wording was consistent and, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking it might need a revamp to include some features from the manual, our new manual.
Yeah,
I'm not that familiar anymore.
yeah. I think they looked at that a bit when they did the design standards, but yeah.
Did we get anything on remember we had the stickers about the heads up?
Yeah.
And we're looking at that. Where are we at on that? Are we gonna look for a sponsor or?
Oh,
I think Vance and I, when we were meeting with the Youth Advisory Committee, had offered that up as a potential topic for them to take with and run. I don't know if we got any traction on that, but I know they were looking for some initiatives to work towards. So I think we mentioned that was an opportunity that they may pick up. So
okay.
I'm not sure where that landed.
I'm not, we'll have to get back to you on that because I'm not sure. I do think that's a good program. I think we took it to National Night Out and handed out, we had quite a few extras. I think we handed several of those out at that event, but we haven't gone back to republishing them or getting new sponsors for those. But we can add that to the notes and report on that in June.
Any other communications or things to add to the agenda? If not, I'm going to close it down. All right, we are adjourned.
All right.